Did you get these for the holidays, or you have them in your stash and you haven't broken them open and you haven't figured out what to do with them yet and you're feeling just a little overwhelmed? Well, keep watching because I'm going to crack these puppies open and we're going to start using them today. Hi, I'm Sherry with Ratchet Up Your Art, where we take the ordinary to the extraordinary and provide a different perspective along the way. And while you're at it, go grab those jelly plates because we're going to get started while we ratchet up your art. Today's video is all about getting you started on your jelly printing journey, and you will need several tools to get started. So I'm going to go through them real quickly so that you can gather those up and we can start printing together. The first thing obviously you're going to need is your jelly plates. It doesn't matter what size you have. They will all work the same. You will need a brayer. So any brayer that you have. You will also need some kind of substrate to put your jelly plate on, whether it be a craft mat, your Stamping Misty, or you can even use a stamp block. It depends on the size of jelly plate that you have, whether you can use any of these. It can also be the glass mat. I will be using the glass mat for this video. The other thing that you will need is some kind of paper, whether it be deli paper, old copy paper, your child's old schoolwork, or even plain old paper, plain old copy paper. It doesn't matter what, it's just whatever you have on hand. These are just basic jelly print for your first time that you're going to be pulling. And so it doesn't matter what the paper is. You're still going to love it and you're still going to enjoy your printing pulls. The other thing that's really important is having some kind of substrate like the craft mat or a glass mat or a paper plate to put paint on. And speaking of paint, any kind of paint that you have on hand will work today. I have various ranges of paint that you can use, anywhere from heavy body paints to fluid acrylics to your good old craft paint, and even some of the famous ones like the Dilutions or the Dina Wakley's or the Tim Holtz Distress paints. Any of these paints will work. For today's video though, I will use the heavy body and the acrylic basics paint. The thing to keep in mind is whatever you have on hand, basic tools will get you started. Also, please go ahead while you're at it and subscribe to my channel so that you can be notified when I will have in-depth videos that go over all types of jelly plates, goes over the different types of paints, the different types of brayers, stencils, paper. It just goes on from there. When you get your jelly plate for the first time, it will come in what is called a clamshell. And inside this clamshell, and I'll go ahead and open this one up. This is the 8x10. It will come with this handy dandy paper. And it will tell you all about jelly printing from the manufacturer's standpoint. Go ahead and read it, digest it. It's really fun to read. It will get you excited. The thing that they will tell you is that the acetate sheets, if you will, come on the jelly plate. These acetate sheets are to be removed. The manufacturer will tell you that because they will cause air bubbles, like these little air bubbles that I have right here. Now, I have several sizes of jelly plates. It doesn't matter how you store your plates. It's whatever works for you and whatever you can live with. For the longest time, I stored my jelly plate with the acetate sheets on it inside the clamshell. That will work just fine. However, if you do not get these air bubbles out of your or off your jelly plate, it will cause indentation into your plate. I have learned to live with my air bubbles. Some people may decide that they can't live with air bubbles. I've learned to embrace them. The other thing too is if you don't have a substrate to put your plate on, you can use the back of the jelly plate acetate sheet and use that today as well. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and take both of these off, close my clamshell, and put my plate onto the glass mat. You could even get an acrylic block for this, plexiglass, something that's non-porous. People like to clean their plates and some people don't like to clean their plates. Most artists that work with jelly plates don't clean them because all of this leftover paint that you are seeing is a patina effect, if you will, that when you are creating your jelly print, they would like some of this paint to pull up onto that print. Some artists like to clean their plate with water, hand sanitizer. I have to tell you, I don't clean mine. And I've seen some artists' plates that are worse than mine. So it's really up to you on how you want to take care of your plate. Either way will work. One is not correct and one is not wrong. It's just a different way of doing it. So now that you have your jelly plate laid out, we will go ahead and I will talk about how to apply paint to your jelly plate. The very first thing that people do when they get their plate is they are so excited about putting paint on the plate. They forget how much paint they put on the plate and how much they need. To be quite honest, you don't need a lot of paint. So I'm going to walk you through the do's and don'ts of how much paint to put on here. And ultimately, your results of your prints is based on your preference. So if you like a lot of paint, you can put that on there. Nobody's stopping you, and there's no reason why you can't have a lot of paint. I prefer a medium amount of paint. Some artists prefer very little paint. So I'll show you the differences. I'll show you what it looks like to have too much paint on your plate. This is too much paint on your plate. When your roller is sliding across the jelly plate, that's too much paint. What you can do when you have too much paint on your plate is go ahead and get some copy paper or paper, whatever, and pull a print. This comparison is meant to show you the difference between having too much paint on your plate versus a thinner layer of paint. This is evident by being able to see the glass mat under your gel plate. Here I am also showing you two ways of how you can transfer your print onto the substrate or paper. Most common method is rubbing your hand on the back of the paper. The other is using the brayer and rolling it over the paper. The brayer method will also clean your brayer at the same time. And really, depending on how the wind blows, determines the method I will use. Another way of determining if you have just the right amount of paint on your plate is when you go and you pull the print off your plate should be clean, meaning no paint left on the plate. Well, except for maybe the occasional paint crust. The other thing that people like to do is put paint directly on their plate. I don't really like that method. I find that the prints are kind of blotchy, what I call a blotchy print. In this comparison, I'm going to show you the difference of adding paint directly to the plate versus using a palette. When I add the paint directly to the gel plate, the paint is not fully loaded onto the brayer, and I have to work extra hard in smoothing out the paint. However, when applying the paint to the palette, I'm able to load the brayer like a paintbrush and apply it to the gel plate without having to smooth out all those paint blobs, thus less work in creating a smoother application of paint. As you can see, with the paint being directly applied to the gel plate, the result is a blotchy print. There are big blobs or blotchy patches of paint on this print. Another way to control the amount of paint on your plate is to have a palette. You're going to preload your brayer, and then you can better control the amount of paint that's on your plate. Now, I can tell you right here, this is what I would call a thin plate. You see how you can kind of see the glass mat underneath this purple that's on the plate? So therefore, the amount of paint that's currently on the plate is a thinner amount than what we've been using. And when you have a thinner amount, you can see my plate is clean. Looks like we got some of that green from the last print on here as well. Let's talk about brayers real quick. You can use your brayers like a paintbrush. So if you wanted a little bit of purple here and over here and maybe some over here, you can definitely use it like a paintbrush in that way. Oh, let's use some of this turquoise, this cobalt turquoise. Okay, that's a little bit of a fluid acrylic. I have purple on here. That's fine. I'm just going to go ahead and go for it. Load my brayer. And I'm going to put some in here. Now, you will see some artists will tell you, oh, only roll in one direction. You know what? You roll however you want. I am going to roll. I roll back and forth. The thing about the brayer is that every time you roll it, you're pulling paint up, especially if you're controlling the amount of paint. So if I were to roll this, I just pulled up some paint. You see that got lighter right there. I'm going to roll this again. That got some paint. So I roll back and forth and I determine the amount of paint that I like on my plate. And as you can see, there's some light areas. Remember this one right here? It's still a little wet, but that's okay. I am going to pull another print. I'm going to pull this print up off of here. But I'm not going to pull it like I normally do where I lay the whole paper down. I am going to take areas and I'm just going to rub in areas to take some of the paint off to layer paint onto the paper. And this is basically layering paint onto other prints. And so that gives it a really nice effect. By this time, you're probably addicted to jelly printing because you can go into all different kinds of avenues of how you want your prints to look. You can do stamping, stenciling, all kinds of things, and all different types of paints. So anything about jelly printing is all about experimental. Go ahead and add some more of this purple onto my plate. I'm going to pull another print. And this time I'm going to rub really hard and see what I can pull up. The more friction you apply to your plate, and I'll just clean off my brayer while I'm at it, the more you might get some of that fun little paint crust that's on the sides of the paint of the plate. Oh, we got a little bit of crust. Yes. This is what jelly artists like to see. Look at that right there. That is crust. Some orange. I didn't even use orange tonight. Some orange, some red, some green, that cobalt turquoise, some over here. Just by rubbing the edges of the plate, this is some of that goodness that artists look for when they are trying to pull a print. So here, that's a little bit too much paint, but maybe if I roll it out, it won't be. But what did I get? I got blotchiness. I broke my own rule. So now I get to work this all out. It's a lot of work. Okay. And I'm going to let that, if it will, I don't know if it will, keep rolling this paint off of here. There we go. The more you roll off, you see how I'm rolling that paint off of here? I'm rolling it off, and it's onto this paper here. Okay. Now we're going to let that dry just a little bit. So it dried a little bit. I rolled my brayer back over one more time and took off some more paint. This is a way to get different color combinations and different pulls on your plate. Everybody knows that purple and yellow are complementary colors, and when complementary colors like purple and yellow mix, they usually make mud. I'm going to go ahead and load my brayer. I'm going to add some yellow on here. Okay. But as you can see, we didn't really make mud because the color underneath is a little bit drier than the yellow. And the yellow is very thin, so it didn't really mix on the plate. And so we're just going to let that dry for a minute. And I'm going to take this that I used the roller for. I'm going to go in here and just do some pulls. Put some of that yellow. So now we're layering different colors on top of each other. Okay. Just to recap, the yellow and the purple didn't mix because the purple layer had dried slightly. And when I applied the yellow, I made sure to apply a small amount of paint on top of the purple, thus keeping the colors from mixing. However, if there had been more paint of either the yellow or the purple, and or if both of them were still wet, it would have turned into mud. Another method of applying colors that are opposite of each other on the color wheel is by pulling a print onto one another, as I demonstrated earlier in this video. Let's say you did all your printing on here and you're ready to clean up. And I wanted to clean my plate. Well, I wouldn't take hand sanitizer to this, and I wouldn't take water to this to clean it up. I would take either a light colored paint. It could be a titanium white. It could be a plain old white. It could be a light pink like this one. Or it can even be a dark, like a dark color, a real dark color. and apply that all over your background. And this is what I call the dismount. This particular one, I'm going to use this darker color. This is one of my favorite colors that I like to use for a dismount print. So again, I put the paint on my plate, and then I'm going to load my brayer. I'm going to put a thin coat. I am not going to rub it into the plate real hard. Might need some more paint here. Cover my whole plate with this color. Clean off my brayer. I'm going to rub the edges really good. See if I get any of that goodness that comes off. And let's see what we get. Again, this is how I clean my plate. My plate is clean. And here's our print. And this is the most unusual print that we had tonight. We got some orange in there. We got some of that cobalt turquoise. We got our yellow. We got our purple. This right here was what I call the dismount print. We decided we were done for the night. We did a layer of paint over all our paint to do one last pull, which will clean our plate. So that's the dismount. This is the print we did when we cleaned off our brayer. This is the print we did when we were trying to get the grunginess of leftover paint. This print here was when we had too much paint on our plate, and then we went back and we did a layered paint on top of that print to give it some texture. This was the blotchy print. Again, when you put paint directly on your plate, you will get a blotchy effect. You have to really smooth it out and roll it. And this is a smoother print. When we put the paint on the palette, we got a smoother application of paint. Final words here in what we learned today. 1, jelly printing is all about experimentation. 2, there's no right or wrong way of doing something with jelly printing. It is all about your preference and what works for you. What works for one artist may not work for another. The key point that I wanted to make with this video is don't be intimidated by your jelly plate. Have fun. Make the mistakes. Put too much paint on your plate. You may not have thought about how you want to store your jelly plates yet. So my advice would be, until you figure that out, or until you check out my other videos on all about jelly plates, is go ahead and put those acetate sheets back on your plate. And if you are really concerned about those air bubbles, then smooth out the acetate sheets and try to get those air bubbles out. Once you have the acetate sheets back on your plate, put it back in the clamshell until you're ready to start playing again. So that's how I started out in keeping my jelly plates, until I decided how I wanted to keep them and store them. We used a brayer. We used copy paper and my child's old school papers. Any of these paints will work just fine on your plate. Have fun. This is really going to be addictive. You're going to make tons and tons of prints. And some of them you're going to like, and some of them you're not going to like. However, I will help you create something with them as we go on this jelly printing journey together. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have not already subscribed, please consider doing so. It would really make my day. Thank you for watching Ratchet Up Your Art.